All right, so today I'm here to talk to you guys about building mobile applications with Framework 7 and Vue. You're probably more interested in the Vue part of things, but we'll talk a little bit about Framework 7 first. So as Ray said, my name is Simon Macdonald. I work here at Adobe. If you need to get a hold of me, there's some contact info on the website, or you can just tweet at me at MacDonST. And Ray said I would explain the shirt. Of course, I will. If you saw me earlier today, you may have noticed I've changed outfits. So why is that? Because last night, I went through the trouble of ironing these pants, these fine pants right here, and I'm like, damn it, I've got to wear those tomorrow. So I didn't want to wear them in the morning in case we were moving a whole bunch of chairs, which we did. So I switched into it for this afternoon. The shirt, I also tried to iron a shirt. Didn't work out as well as the pants. All right, so first time with an iron. What are you going to do? So I look around the room. I see a lot of friendly faces. Obviously, those are the people that don't know me that well. And I see some people that I do know, and they're like, just get on with it, Simon. So why don't I do that? All right, so have you ever noticed that building nice-looking mobile applications is pretty damn hard? If you're having to build stuff for both Android, iOS, the web, all of these different platforms, that's kind of a pain in the ass, really. And in my estimation, when I try to envision building a new mobile app, what I have in my head, that golden standard that I have, looks something like that. It looks like a Van Gogh painting. It's just amazing. But then once I start developing it, it looks more like this. I would like to say that that is something that my daughter dreamed up, but she's a way better artist than I am. That's sadly me. So yeah, it's really hard to make these things look nice. And why is that? Why is design so hard? Well, I think it's actually because CSS is awesome. It's no one's ever had CSS problems, right? It's just the easiest language in the world to learn. So this is a joke that I will repeat. I feel bad to do it, but for those of you who haven't heard it before, hire a graphic designer. A good graphic designer is worth their weight in gold. They also cost their weight in gold. So if you can, marry a good graphic designer. They come a bit cheaper that way. So yeah, I'm horrible at CSS, absolutely horrible at CSS. So whenever possible, I try to find ways around it, mostly because I'm pretty lazy. I mean, I don't want to do any kind of extra work whatsoever. And I didn't mention it before, but I work here at Adobe, so I have the finest stock graphics there is. Oh, that's not the one I thought it was. Anyway, good stuff. Yeah, it actually runs in the family. I have a whole photo album of places my dad has fallen asleep, and some of them are really scary, like driving a car. That's not a joke. That has happened multiple times. It's not great. But then you think to yourself, why didn't you wake him up before you took the picture? Because it's not as funny if you wake him up before you take the picture. So anyway, that's why I use a framework like Framework 7 to save myself just an absolute ton of work. So is anybody here actually familiar with Framework 7? Oh, we have one hand. That is awesome. That is 100% more people than I thought would be familiar with Framework 7. So basically, Framework 7 is an open source HTML, JavaScript, CSS framework that allows you to build mobile applications. So it has two primary themes, one that looks exactly like iOS, and the other one that follows the material theme on Android. It's actually written by a guy in Russia, which has been absolutely fascinating working with him because the asynchronous mode of our communication is just great because they're I think 12 hours in my future now, or maybe it's 12 hours, I can't even remember, but it's one direction or the other. So if this demo isn't super fast, remember that these are actually iframes that are loading from his server in Russia. So let's just give this a try here. So this is not a joke. This really is doing that. So if we take a look at the list view, so we can see everything kind of mirrors what you would have in normal iOS. And then let's see, some modal dialogues, just pop up an alert dialog. You might kind of notice that everything looks exactly like it would be in iOS. And then of course over here we have our Android material theme. So I go into the forms, check out some buttons. You have just a myriad of buttons to choose from. And then when you click on something, you notice you get that same kind of material feel when you push on the button, and then everything extends out from there. So it's a really great way of bootstrapping your application to make it look nice. And if you're like me, CSS challenged, it's a great way to go about it. The nice thing about it is there are 3 bindings currently for Framework 7. The first one is if you're familiar with jQuery, there's a very jQuery-like API that you can use. You're just basically taking your HTML and adding some attributes to it. All of the JavaScript APIs follow a jQuery binding, so you're good. As well, there is a Vue binding, which is what we'll be using today. And finally, just released in the past week and a half, is a React binding. So if you are into React, you can also take a look at that. And that's something that Rami will be talking about in the next presentation, is all about React. So kind of dovetails nicely. Hat tip to you, sir. All right. So here's an example of an app in Framework 7. So quite simply, it's just your basic kind of hello world thing where you have a nav bar and a block in there with some text. And when you take a look at what the HTML that actually creates it, you may notice that there's a div, has an ID of an app, and then everything from there on in is Framework 7 components in Vue. So each one of those is encapsulating an individual part of the UI. So you have your status bar, which creates that blue area at the top. Then you have what's the views. So you would keep all of the views of your application inside of this inside of this tag. And each individual view has a tag. And then, of course, you can add in the navbar. And this is our first example of some Vue code. You have v-if iOS. So the navbar gets handled a little differently on Android and iOS. On iOS, the navbar doesn't move with the page, but on Android it does. This is the way that we handle that in Framework 7. And then we get into a number of pages. So we can kind of get all the way down to we have a block and we have a title. And you can see the mustaches so that we know that we're getting that title from outside of the template itself. So it's a pretty good way of composing an application. But like I said, the only tag that you really recognize is the div tag. So that's where I've actually kind of put the cart before the horse here, and I probably should have talked about Vue first, but I'll remember that for the next time I give this presentation. All right, so here's a whole bunch of text about what Vue is from the Vue website, and I'm obviously not going to read that. But I think really what the most important thing to learn from Vue is that it gives you a great way of composing reusable components using their technology, and it only focuses on the Vue layer. So you can actually use Vue in a React application if you want. You don't have to only use Vue and forever use Vue forevermore. It doesn't matter. If you want to embed Vue in React, or if you want to embed Vue in Angular, you can totally do that, which I think is a fantastic way of doing stuff. So what we have here is the HTML for the application that we just saw. So the initial page is just the title, and then we have a body, and it has a div with an ID of app. That's it. That's all the HTML that you need. Because then from that point, you get into your JavaScript layer. And here's where we get into importing a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously, we're going to import the Vue framework, as well as Framework 7, which is the basic JavaScript layer. And then Framework 7 Vue, which is mapping the JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to a Vue binding. And then the roots for our application. In this case, it's very simple. We really only have a home page. There's only one root. And then, of course, app, which is the main component that composes our application. Once we set up to use Framework 7, that's when all of those UI elements that I showed you earlier, you can use absolutely any of those in your application at that point in time. And so here's where the magic really starts to happen. When I say new Vue, and I have that element property, it's going to look for hashtag app. So I'm going to look for an ID of app, and then I'm going to take the template, which we're going to see in the next stage, and we're just going to import that or embed that right into our HTML at the attach point of ID equals div. And for the components, we only need one component at this stage, and that's our app component. So that pretty simply creates the UI that you saw before. And then, of course, the app component itself looks something like this. So again, I just copied all of that HTML that you had seen earlier, but you'll notice one big change, or actually two big changes. The first is there's a template tag around it. So what's really great about Vue is you can have a single page or a single file components, I should say. So that's where you can take the UI that we're going to put into the template, any kind of business logic, you put that in the scripts, and then something that I'm not showing here because I'm not overriding any of the styles that Framework 7 gives me, but you can also put the styles tag in there as well. So you can have your HTML, your JavaScript, and your CSS all in a single file. So anybody not like that idea? Because I think for like 20 years or so, we got one right there. All right, well, we'll try to convince you later. But for 20 years, we were told, never do that. You got to keep all that stuff in separate files. So that's, yeah, OK, we can do that. But with the kind of modern tooling techniques that we have right now, we can put all of this reusable components we can put all of this stuff into a single file, so this can be a reusable component. Now imagine that this was a button, and I can just like drop that button into multiple applications or multiple different parts of the application, and you let the tooling take care of embedding it into a single file when you go to run in production. That way it gets rid of all the redundancies. So hopefully we'll be able to convince you guys that that's a good idea. And again, in the script at this point in time, there's only really one thing that's happening here. We're exporting the default object, and we're giving it a name of app and data. And the only thing in the data object that's getting returned is the title. So as you can see up in block title, we have the mustaches, and that's the title. So if I was to go in there and change hello world to anything else, the title would automatically get updated for you. So that kind of makes sense, right? Everybody following so far? That's great. I haven't lost anybody except for myself. Awesome. Oh, wow. Am I like talking to a million miles a minute? I probably shouldn't have had that cookie beforehand. That's what I'm thinking. All right. So what am I saying? Can we just like compose applications of reusable components? And it's like, yeah, of course that's what I'm saying. Were you not paying attention? What the hell's wrong with you guys? Jeez. OK. That went over like a lead balloon. Awesome. All right. So what we're going to do right now is some live coding where I create a brand new component from scratch and embed it into the application. So I didn't take the chicken's way out, where's Alex, and record everything into a video because I want to fail miserably in front of everybody. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. That's the wrong button. I always do that.
Good start.
Yeah, no. So the other nice thing about it is one of the reasons I want to do this live coding is because I need you folks to actually see how bad my laptop is. So when I requisition a new one, and possibly if I accidentally spill some water on it by the end of this presentation, that would be awesome. All right, so just bringing it up my editor. So right now, I have the application up and running. So it's exactly what I was showing you in the previous slides. We just have a very simple home page with our blocks in there. And the cool thing about it is right now in the development tools, I've said that it's a Galaxy S5, an Android device. But if I go ahead and switch that over to an iPhone 5 and then just refresh the page, it looks like iOS. And you didn't really have to do anything at that point in time. Personally, I like the material theme a little bit better. I think it's easier for you folks to see right now. So I'm going to switch back over. And there we go. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to query a web service that I have running on my laptop to get me a random piece of art. And then I'm going to start displaying it in the application. So to show you that there's actually a service running behind there, and I don't know if you can see that at all. But when I hit localhost 8974, it's just going to return me like a new image with the artist. So yeah, it switched from JOJIC to Jeff Lemire, and if we hit that again, we have Julian Lytle. So yeah, my service is working. So this is like actual live stuff that's happening. So going back over to the app and switching in here. So the first thing that I need to do is in my index.html. This is a little more of a complicated example. We have our content security policy. So when you're building mobile apps, especially if you're building hybrid or ones on the web, you want to lock down what your application is actually going to accept as valid content. So the first step I got to do, because if not, I'll get to the demo, I'll refresh things, and everything will go to hell in a handbasket, is to add in localhost port 8974 so that I can say that it's OK to get data from there. And you may have noticed some flashing on the screen after I hit the save button. That's because right now I'm running an NPM script that is just anytime it detects changes in the application, it's just going to do a hot reload for us. So if we were to take a look over here in the head, the content security policy has added in localhost 8974. So that stuff happened for you automatically without you having to do like any other additional work. All right, so now that we can actually go ahead and get that kind of stuff, we're going to go into main.js, and we're going to add in a store. Now, this isn't going to be as fancy as some of the Redux stuff that Ryan was talking about. In fact, it's going to be really lazy, and I'm just going to use local storage. I wouldn't recommend you do that in production, but for this demo, I think it's going to work just fine. Or at least, I hope it's going to work just fine. So we'll just set up the store. We're going to call it picture store. And I'm just going to do json.parse. I can't type, by the way. I'm really horrible at typing. So if you see any mistakes, please shout them out, especially if there's supposed to be an I type, because the I key is really bad. These are not jokes. This is like actual real life here, folks. So local storage, get item. Let's call it pictures. And if pictures doesn't exist, I'm just going to return an empty array. OK, so right now, I'm just creating like an area where I'm going to be able to store any of the pictures that we're downloading from the remote service. And then from that point, if we go into the components page's home, so this is our home page. I kind of cheated a little bit when I was doing the slides. I didn't show you app then home. I just put everything into one slide. But basically, app composes just kind of the main views, and then we show the home page. And then home.view gets loaded, and that's where you can see our block with the hello world title and all of the lore of Ipsum text. So what I'm going to do is go in here, and I'm going to add some pull to refresh code. So I'm going to say that the navbar is going to remain fixed, and we're going to do pull to refresh. So basically, I'm adding properties to this Vue component, where I'm telling you that I don't really want the navbar to move, and I also want to give you kind of a pull to refresh div, which I'm sure you've seen in many other mobile apps. And then the next point is for when the pointer gets a refresh, I want it to call this onRefresh function. So the cool thing is when I hit save right now, we should see a bunch of errors over in the developer tool. And it's like, so right now, you can see that Vue is warning us that the property onRefresh doesn't exist at all. So the hot reloading has picked up that I'm trying to use something, but it doesn't exist. So it gives you hints along the way. So from this point, what I need to do is because the template that I'm using, I have a very opinionated developer that works with me, and he really wanted to use the Airbnb linter, which is really super annoying. So we talked him down to semi-standard, so it's only super annoying instead of really super annoying. But still, if I don't add in this global's picture store, the linting will fail, and the app won't update, and nobody will be having any fun here in Whoville. So all right, and the object that's exported for this component, right now we only have the data, which is the whole world. But we also need to add a new section, and these are going to be some it's the methods that are going to be associated with this component. So, all right, so we create the methods, and we do the onRefresh. So we know that we need to call, this is where the function onRefresh is set up. And of course, you may have noticed this is all like ES 2015 code, so you know that there's some Babel transpiling happening in the background. So onRefresh takes two parameters. The first one is the event, and the second one is done. Done is a method that we can call to let the UI know that the refreshing is complete. All right, so we'll set this up. We're going to use fetch. I'm still trying to get used to the promisification of everything that Bojan was talking about, but seems like fetch is working pretty well right now. So we're going to go ahead and say, let me fetch this from localhost 8974. Then, because we're like cool kids and we're using all the fancy new ES 2015 stuff, we're just going to say response fat arrow response.json. So that's great, because what we have here is that's a whole method. It's in like one line. We don't have to put brackets around the first response. We don't have to put a return for response.json, because it's like all the syntactical sugar that everybody never knew that they wanted but now loves. And then from that point, because we're going to do a little bit more with this second function, is once we have the data that comes in this case, since it's not a single line function that's returning something, we have to put brackets around data and then have the fat arrow and then have the body implementation. So here we're just going to do picture store dot unshift data. So why am I using unshift in this case? Is because when I get that new picture in, I want to put it at the top of the list. I don't want to have to scroll down to the bottom of the app to find my new picture. I just want it to pop in at the top, sort of like what Instagram or Twitter would do. And then if I do local storage dot set item, and I'm going to do JSON stringify and picture store. Oh, yeah, I forgot to give it the. So the best part about this is, as I go through this stuff, and then we'll get to the very end, we'll save, and nothing will work, and there'll be a whole bunch of ESLint errors, but then we'll get to debug together, so you'll learn how to debug as well. It's great. All right, and then finally, now that I've downloaded the data that I want, I've saved it off to the picture store, I can call the done method, and that's going to tell the refresh thing to like stop spinning and just pop back in. So we should be all set there. So yeah, we've already got our lint. We've got a semicolon missing on line 29. So let's just check that out. Yep, there we go. And because ESLint is super picky, as soon as I hit the save, we got that error. We went in, we fixed it right away. All right, so now we have our refresh method. So we have a way of getting a new picture from our web service. The next step is we're going to create a brand new component. Finally. So if we say new file, and we call it picture, I can't type, picture list dot view. All right, so we have our brand new component. So the very first thing that we need to do is create the template. And in this case, I'm going to start off by putting everything into a div, which is pretty standard. And then I'm going to use an F7 card. But I'm going to do something a little fancy. I'm going to do v4, all of the pics in pictures. All right, sounds good. And then in there we need to have, let's see, let's do a v7 header. Can't type. Oh yeah, sorry, v7 card header. And in there, we're just going to have a div with a class equal to Facebook name. And this is where we'll use our mustaches to get pics.artist. So just to give you a quick look here. So when we get the response back, and I'm sorry you guys can't see that at all. Let's move that up a little bit. So when the response comes back, we get two properties in our object. The first is image, and the second is artist. So the artist that we get back here is going to map directly to pics.artist. So just so that there's no magic involved in here. All right, so we have our header. And if we do F7 card content, and here's where we get into more F7 fun. So we're going to bind the source equal to pics.image. And I want the width to be 100% of the card itself because I want to use as much space as possible to show you this image. All right, so yeah, the template looks pretty good. And then from there, we got to write some code to actually display this stuff. So we have our script. Again, I'm going to be using picture store, so to keep ESLint from complaining about it, I'm going to add picture store in, and then we're going to export defaults, which is the export default, which is basically the way when when you mount the component, it's going to export this object back to Vue so it knows what to do with it. And we're going to give it a name, and the name itself is going to be picture list. I actually like to keep the name to be the same as what the file name is. It makes stuff a lot less confusing. And then from there, we're just going to return data. And all I'm going to do is say that pictures is equal to window, I can't type, picture store. Return that, and then trailing semicolon, and Yeah. Okay, so with a little bit of luck, that's, yeah, it's not complaining about anything. So all I'm doing right here is being able to use this pictures object in my for loop. So I'm just going to grab everything out of local storage, which I've made available earlier, and go ahead and just like loop through all of the cards and go ahead and get stuff. So far, so good. Going back to our home, we need to be able to use the picture list from inside of this function. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of this block right here that has the title and the lorem ipsum, so you can see everything disappears. And then from there, I'm just going to say, I'm going to use this tag, picture list. All right. And I love when I do that. All right, so I'm adding that tag in. And then inside our JavaScript, if we do import picture list from okay. So here's one thing that screwed me up before with this particular template. I ran into an issue where if there's not a new line after an import, after the last import, ESLint will complain about that. That seems a little picky to me. Anybody else find that a little picky? But there you go. So that should be good now. And the last step that we need to do is to just go in here and say, we're going to use some new components that aren't already included. And that component is going to be called picture list. And it's going to be from the picture list that we imported. And if we save that, yeah, we still got some ESLint errors here. Yeah, because I think I put a, wait. There we go. All right, so put a semicolon when I needed a comma. My bad, sorry. So with a little bit of luck, so if everybody could cross your fingers with me, when I do the pull to refresh here, we should get an image. So let's give that a shot. No, I think I need to do a refresh because I really screwed things up. There's the pull to refresh that comes in just for us. And we have an image from Mike Norton. And if I do another pull to refresh, we have one from Tim Seeley, and the Mike Norton one moves to the bottom. And we just keep doing that. So yeah, no oohs, no ahs, nothing. It doesn't count if I have to ask for it. You should all be very ashamed of yourselves. So what we did there in picture list is we built a reusable component with really not that much effort at all, where you can embed a list of images in this card format into any application that you want to build. So that's like quite reusable. So I think that's pretty cool. But getting back to the presentation itself, all right. So anybody who actually wants to learn more about that, in the presentation that I'll tweet out, all of the things that I went through, I've put slides for them. I just wanted to try live coding. I'll never do it again. You were right. I shouldn't have doubted you. All right, so we've created a new component. So that's pretty awesome. It's amazing. But one thing that I kind of glossed over there is how do we get those components included into our application? I just created a new file and it got picked up and everything was amazing. So a few people wondering about that. Now I see a couple of people nodding their heads. It's okay, we'll just use Webpack to do it. It's fine, right? Everybody loves Webpack. Yeah, so don't run away yet. It's okay, it's cool. You don't have to learn Webpack for this stuff. We've got a lot of templates that'll get you started on it. So in each of the following templates that I'll show you, we've already set up Webpack for you, we've set up Babel, and we've set up ESLint. You don't actually have to use the same ESLint rules. When you use the template, go ahead and change them to make them a lot less picky. If I make them less picky, then Tommy will fly over from Australia and probably hit me with a didgeridoo or something like that. I can actually say that because we're friends, and it was his birthday yesterday, and I get to crap all over. Holy shit, he's 50. Oh man, I gotta crap on him later tonight. I forgot that he was actually turning 50. I wished him happy birthday. Anyway, neither here nor there. So anyway, we've set up all of this wonderful, crazy stuff for you so that you don't have to worry about it. We've added unit testing using Mocha. We've added end-to-end testing using Nightwatch. That stuff is in there for you. And as well, kind of things that I was talking about at the very beginning of this presentation. We've set up F7 and Vue for you so you don't have to as well. Now, honestly, I don't really care if you use any of that stuff, but we put that in the template for you for the very beginning. And the reason that we do that is we're trying to combat JavaScript paralysis, because I don't know, anybody like start a new project recently when you like sit down and is like, okay, what am I going to use? And it's like, there's a million options for every layer of every part of JavaScript now. So we've come up with some suggestions. You don't have to use them. Feel free not to. Delete them from the template. That's great. Go for it. But we wanted to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So how would we go? Oh, sorry. There's a number of templates. The one that I used today during the example was this blank template. You can see how it looks both on iOS and Android. Pretty simple. As well, we have a tab template. So for iOS, you see the tabs show up at the bottom the way they're supposed to in iOS. On Android, the tabs show up at the top, which is the old standard. You can also, with Framework 7, you can have those tabs show up at the bottom, just like the iOS, which is a relatively new inclusion into Android, I think as of Android N. And just as we're all getting used to Android N standards, Android O will be out in a couple of weeks probably, and we'll have to get used to that stuff all over again. So that'll be awesome. And then, of course, we have a split pane. The way the split pane looks like on iOS is like this. So if you have a tablet, the left pane is always shown. If it's on a device, again, it's hidden for you. Exactly the same thing on Android, it's just I couldn't fit the two screenshots on the same page. So all of those templates are available for you to use right now, just to get you bootstrapped into building a new mobile app. To get started, if you haven't got Cordova CLI installed, probably be the first step. From there, if you create a new application and you add in the template, so in this example I'm using split panel, but you can use tabs or blank. And then once you do that, if you cd into the application, whatever name you give it, run npm install, maybe go get a coffee at that point in time. Or if you've actually started upgrading to use Yarn, then you just have to wait a couple of seconds. Man, I really hate this because I have friends that work at NPM, and I don't like to crap on them, so I'm not going to, but come see me later. And then once you've got that, you do NPMRunDev. So what you've seen here today, with my app here, this is all done from NPMRunDev. So it just runs the development server for you and gives you all that nice hot reloading and fun stuff that we saw during the demo. And then you're all up and running. And when you decide that you want to go ahead and get this into an app store, what you could do is go ahead and do Cordova Platform at Android or iOS. Then if you do npm run Cordova iOS or Cordova Android, that'll open up the simulator or the emulator for you, depending if you're on Android or iOS. You can get everything building there. But when you're really ready to deploy it to the App Store, you do npm run build. And from that point in time, your application is in the www folder that normal Cordova applications use. And you could just use the regular Cordova commands to build it and get it into the App Store. So that's some fun stuff. All right. So what's coming down the pipeline in the future for this kind of stuff? First and foremost, we're going to add progressive web app support to all of our templates. So one of the things that we want you to be able to do is to easily target the web, Android, and iOS with all of this stuff. And so that's kind of starting tomorrow as I'm sitting in this room going through some other stuff. It'll be progressive web app support is first and foremost on my plate. As well, we'll include the service worker toolbox, which will allow you to reduce the amount of boilerplate code that you have to write for service workers. And we'll make sure that all of our templates score really high on Lighthouse so that everything is working really well when you grab the template. So if it scores low on Lighthouse, that's your fault. That's not our fault. We'll give you a Lighthouse score of 100 with the template, then you can screw it up. All right. And finally, we're going to create new templates. Instead of using Framework 7 and Vue, we're going to be using Framework 7 and Preact. So why Preact? Because the API is compatible with React, and there's no crazy licensing issues. So I know of at least 3 gigantic companies, oh, there's one, that can't use React because of the licensing. Unfortunately, Adobe is one of them. But there is one representative of a giant company who can use, it's Rami, he's right over there, he works for Microsoft, that can use React. I don't know why your lawyers can't talk to our lawyers and straighten them out.
We have several products on React too.
Yeah, It's weird. IBM doesn't like React either, so lawyers, they get paid a lot. So even if you don't like Vue, if you like some of the concepts that I've shown you with composable objects creating your applications, you can switch to React using the same kind of stuff in the not too distant future. So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. So please feel free to ask questions. Unfortunately, I have the mic up here, so nobody gets to ask questions. All right, so the question was, in all the examples that I showed, it was template, script, then style. Is that a hard and fast rule, or is that just something that I did? And it's just something that I did. I usually would start with the HTML at the top. No other particular reason, and that's kind of the way I like to have it set up in the file. All right. There was another question. Yeah, so if I actually pointed my device to that URL, then it would hot reload on the device for me.
In browser though?
Yeah, in the browser. Yeah, so currently there's not a real good way to do hot reloading in a Cordova Android or a Cordova iOS application. Yeah. But what we're trying to do as much as possible is get people to develop their apps in the browser so they don't have to get into the compiling and deploying to the device step. It's a lot faster that way. And fingers crossed, in the not too distant future, we won't need Cordova Android at all anymore, and we'll be able to do everything as progressive web apps. So one of the other fun things I get to work on this year is making sure all of the Cordova plugin APIs match current W3C standards. So for those of you who like promises over callbacks, that's great because we're moving in that direction. And you'll be able to build an app, run it on Chrome on Android, and package it as a Cordova iOS app to run on iOS, all using the same APIs. So hopefully soon we'll get away from having to need all these crazy things on the Cordova land. All right. C'est tout, c'est fini? Oh, wait, we have. Oh, okay. All right, yeah. I hope that's it, because that's all the French I know. Like, that's it. All right, thanks.